I never know who's going to be here. I never know who's going to be watching. But God does. And somebody is here or somebody's watching online that needs to hear something. I worked all week putting a message together. And last night, about 7:30, it died. And I've been around it long enough to know I can't resurrect the dead. I've tried. I can't do it. I said, okay, God, it's me and you. And I have something to say to you today. I got a letter back in November. And it says, Brother Lewis, or it wasn't a letter, it was an email. And it came to the church, and it was passed on to me. And I know the guy who sent it. I don't think he knows me, but I know him. He said, I'm sitting in Central Florida, working on my itinerary as your church mobilization representative for South Carolina. I just happened to come across your message on Jesus Moments. I listened in and God spoke to my heart deeply. Thank you for the work you do and for the message that you bring. I'm sure I'll run into you at some of our meetings with the district. May God bless your work richly. You never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. But God knows. And that's all that matters. So once again, open your Bibles, if you would, to the book of Mark. And we're going back to the 5th chapter. If I can get this thing done. Yeah, there it is. Mark chapter 5. You know, sometimes when you read the Bible and there's something interesting there, I hope that you go back over it and over it and over it until you just get all that God's got for you. That's the way chapter 5 has been for me. Verse number 1, chapter 5. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he, meaning Jesus, had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken to pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. This text sits right in the middle of several hopeless situations. Now, somebody is facing a hopeless situation. I would imagine some of us has got more than one. We don't know how it's going to work out. We just don't understand. And sometimes we have a hard time just giving it to God. We give it and take it back, and we give it and take it back, and we give it and take it back. I know I'm not the only one that does that, so I know that you do it too. But somebody is facing an impossible situation. I've got something to say to you today. Just prior to the events that we've read, Jesus and his disciples were out on the sea during a tremendous storm. In their minds, they were in a hopeless situation. Remember what they asked Jesus? Don't you care that we're going to die? Well, he was in the boat too. And if they died, he was going to be one of them that went down. Sure, he cared. But he knew something they didn't know. And he said, oh, you got such little faith. When they were engulfed in the storm, these were seasoned fishermen. It wasn't the first storm they had been in. They had been in other storms. They were helpless to solve their problem. They thought, they tried, they did, they rowed, they did everything they knew to do except call on Jesus. And then they called on him. That storm out on the deep was a problem for the disciples, but it was no problem for Jesus. He stood up in the bow of the boat and he calmed the storm. Peace, be still. In other words, wind stopped blowing, waves lay down. And they did, immediately. And in calming the storm, he also calmed his men. The crisis was over. The master had used his power. Now Jesus moves from that impossible situation to another impossible situation. As a matter of fact, a whole new set of impossible situations. The bow of the boat touches land. The moment that it touches land, there's a dude that comes running out of the hills, screaming. He looks awful. And he's running down toward the men. And he encounters this demon-possessed man. This man possessed by thousands of demons. He can't help himself. The people around him are helpless to help him. So Jesus will deal with the man who is helpless. and he'll bring a solution to a problem that everybody feels is impossible. And when he finishes with that, then he's going to move back over to the other side and deal with the diseased woman. And then he's going to, right in the middle of that, deal with a dead girl. All in a day's journey for the Master. All four of these situations appear totally hopeless to the mind of man from the human perspective. Yet in each of these cases, Jesus proves that he is the master of them all. So I'm speaking to you today about the master and the maniac. I could say the master of all things. If that demon-possessed man were alive today, we'd take care of him by sending him to a mental institution. If the diseased woman were alive today, we'd send her to the hospital, to the intensive care ward. If the dead girl was here today, we'd just send her to the cemetery. In our day, we have ways of dealing with things that are quite different. We take the quickest way out. So as we move through this chapter, these verses, we're going to discover that Jesus is not just the master of the deep. He doesn't just calm waves, stop winds, and ease men's hearts. But he's also the master of the demonic, the master of disease, the master of death. He will demonstrate his power over all situations, all problems, all difficulties, and all dangers. So no matter what you're facing, whether it's little or big in your eyes, easy or hard, difficult or impossible, or easy, we serve the master of that thing. And we have not because we ask not. So we're going to have to understand and we're going to have to learn how to call upon him, how to trust him, how to believe him, how to give it into him. Here, Lord, I can't handle this, but you can. Today, we're going to walk through a cemetery. We're going to go right in. And we're going to watch Jesus demonstrate his power in the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm is much bigger than the physical realm. It's more powerful than our physical realm. We're going to watch him deliver a man from a hopeless and a spiritual possession and bondage that nobody else can handle. Nobody can do anything. And as we watch Jesus deliver this poor man, we need to keep in mind that he can move in our lives with the same power, the same authority, and the same result as he moves in this situation. He can break any chains that bind you. He can break any fetters that Satan has tried to place upon you. He can set you free from anything that is hindering you. So I want to talk about the master and the maniac. And the first thing I want us to do, and this is a two-parter. There's no way I can do it all in one. You know that. You've been around long enough. Suffer with me. But the first thing we'll do is consider this man. I read verses 1 through 5 in the opening statement. And this man's defilement was pictured in verse number 2. When he had come out of the boat, Jesus, immediately there met him a man out of the tombs that had an unclean spirit. So as our story opens, we're told that this man is held in the grip of Satan, the devil. Satan is the master of this man's life. He controls the aspects of his life. And this man is in a state of hopelessness and helplessness. He can't break it, and neither can anybody else. And we're told that he has this unclean spirit. And we find out that he's not just the home of one spirit, but he's possessed by a legion of demonic spirits. Now, according to verse number 9, a legion in the Roman army could be from 2,000 to 6,000. So this dude had a problem. And it was a bad problem. He was possessed by 2,000 to 6,000 demonic spirits. In verse 13, we're told that when the demons left the man, they entered a herd of swine, and there was 2,000 of the pigs. So we know that there was at least 2,000, one for every pig. So this man was totally under the control of Satan. This man's case is no different from the control of every lost soul in the world. Every person that does not know Jesus is controlled by Satan. He has some degree of control over them. Those who run from Jesus, those who claim that there is no God, those who are atheists, so to speak, they're all under the thumb and control in one degree or another. John chapter 8 verse 44 says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of liars. So you're going to serve one master or the other. And if you're not serving Jesus, the Lord, then you're serving the other one. You're not neutral. Oh yeah, Pastor, I'm just neutral. No, you're not neutral. Jesus said either you're for me or against me. And if you're not for him, guess what? The other choice is you only get two. pitiful shape. What an awful place to be. He is in a state of defilement. I was there. I know how the mind works. This man had a depravity. In Mark chapter 5, verses 3 through 4, there's two words that factor heavily in this man's world, in his life. The first word is cemetery, the home of the dead, the place of the dead. The other is chains, the binding. So those two words dominate his life. This man had a dwelling among those who were rotting, those who were dead, those whose lives had gone from them. The demons in him drove him away from anything living, anything that was bright and cheery. And he spent his life in the cemetery, among the tombs in the hills. In those days, people were not usually buried in the ground. Tombs were carved in a hillside, or they were built in little houses. And bodies were placed there. Because of his demons, this man lived with bones and decaying corpses of the dead. Because he moved among those types of items. We're told that the people around him, they did their best. They tried to restrain him. They would catch him and bind him in fetters and chains. Fetters would attach to his feet. Chains would bind his hands and his arms and his torso. These man-made devices could do no good in holding him. He would break the chains and he would just tear the fetters to pieces. He broke them as though they were made of paper. We look at this poor soul, and it's not hard to make the leap from him to the lost ones around us. There's so many that's lost that are just absolutely miserable. And their lives are dark. There's not much sunshine in their soul. They just move among the dead. When we look at this poor man, we see those others that are trapped in the same state of depravity. It's a pitiful situation. The sin that possesses the heart of a lost sinner drives him to spend his days and waste his years on things that will not live and will not last. The lost sinner has no desire to be around those things that are joyful and happy. Oh yeah, he likes the bright lights and he likes the loud music and he's thinking, oh, I'm having a good time. But he's not. He's miserable in his heart. Think back. Most of you were there. You know what it's like. You've got friends that are in that kind of life right now. Their lives are so mundane and so dark. No joy, no real peace, no happiness. no desire to be around anything that's living. Death and the works of deadness are all they really care about. Of course, man has his methods of trying to conquer such things. And there's been an explosion of our remedies. Cure all the problems and the plagues of humanity. We think that we can do it. So we build more jails and prisons. We have our asylums and institutions. We have our bottles of pills, potions, and psychologists. And now we've got, fentanyl coming across the border in dump trucks almost. There's enough right now in America to kill every man, woman, and child on the face of the planet. And people are dying, but they're still taking that stuff. Duh. If you don't want to die, don't take it. That's an easy solution, isn't it? But they're not doing it. They're still taking it. And they're still dying. And you've been watching television. When they get a little crazy in their lives, they want to take it out on innocent people. And in the bigger cities, you're afraid to walk down the street. You're afraid to get on the subways or the buses or whatever because you're going to be trapped. It's a horrible situation. Mankind acts and does what he does because he's lost. He has no hope. So he don't care what he does. Many people choose darkness over light because they hate the light. I remember not long ago talking to somebody that was down on his luck, and he was asking people one after the other for money and that kind of stuff. And I said, have you been to church lately? And he said, what I want to go to the church for? I said, well, it might be an answer to your problem. Because Jesus is there. I don't have to go to no church to be with Jesus. I said, no, you don't. But it'll help. You don't have to go to a ballpark to play ball or a golf course to play golf, but it helps. So if you want some of Jesus, go to a church. It'll help. People don't like the light. John chapter 3, verses 19 through 21. People love darkness instead of light because their deeds are evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. That's truth. Lost people choose sin over the Savior because they're evil. And they're controlled by evil. And they're totally given over to this pursuit of evil. I don't have time to read it, but you can write down Romans chapter 3, verses 10 through 23. It'll explain it. So let me add that a professing believer, someone who says, yep, I go to church, I'm saved. But the church is full of those who profess to believe. They need to examine their heart when their heart begins to desire to walk in darkness. Or, let me put it a little different way. You need to look around at your spiritual condition when you start finding reasons to avoid the light and the truth. When you can't sit through a church service, it just makes you antsy. Or you get up 4 or 5 times and go and walk around a little bit. Or you just find reasons to avoid the house of God altogether. And there's a whole bunch of people that's doing that. Oh, I can get my preaching from the TV. So we watch about 3 minutes of it and change the channel. And we think, I've done it. You have a spiritual problem if that's where you're at. And sometimes we'll blame the preacher or we'll blame the church and we'll go somewhere else and it's the same thing all over again. America has a problem. The church has a problem. Because that's what's going on in a lot of our churches. You're beginning to revert back to the old ways of the old man. And that's a dangerous and frightening place to find yourself in. And if you're watching me today, don't cut me off. I'm doing my best up here. I know I might be bothering you. But if it's bothering you, you got a problem. And it's not me. It's in you. Just saying. The man was desperate. He had 2,000 demons inside of him. That'd make anybody desperate. He was in desperation. In verse 5 of chapter 5, always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. What an awful situation. But we have it all over our towns and cities. People cutting themselves. People angry. And they had just as soon shoot you as look at you. And we have people just driving by houses and they're shooting in the houses. What kind of depravity is that? This man was in desperation. Can you imagine the terror that this man caused to himself, to his family, to those around him? He's up in the cemetery, naked, running around like a wild man, because he is a wild man, day and night. And he cuts himself, and his body is bloody. And he's got scars all over his body. And he screams and he yells in his torment. Now Jesus knew of this man's problem. You say, well, how did he know? Because he's the Lord. He's God. He knew. And he had an appointment with this man. The man didn't know it. The disciples didn't know it. But Jesus knew it. Because in chapter 4, verse 38 of Mark, he said, fellows, get in the boat and let's go to the other side. The only thing on the other side was this dude. And Jesus had an appointment with him. You've heard the story of the 10 lepers. They were walking along. They were eaten up with leprosy. Leprosy is a type of sin. They had no clue that Jesus was anywhere around them, but they went around the corner and there he was. And they fell down and said, if you want to, you can heal me. And he said, I want to be healed. There was another place where there was just one leper. And that leper came and fell at his feet and said, if you want to, you can heal me. He had an appointment with each one of those. And he took care of them. And he healed them. And he set them free. He had an appointment with a man that was in torment. He had an appointment with Bernie Lewis one day. And he wasn't afraid to sit down on the back of my motorcycle. When I was running about 75 miles an hour down Highway 27 in Central Florida, drunk as a skunk. And I can almost see him. Deny me now and I won't bother you again. Because that's what he said. And instantly, I knew who it was, and what it meant. And I knew that I was in serious trouble. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to be aware. This man, when he saw that boat come ashore, he knew, I'm in serious trouble. That's Jesus. How did he know? Because the demonic spirits that was inside of him said, that's Jesus. And you're in trouble, son. So he goes running down, bloody, cut, crazy. I don't know why he cut himself. Maybe it was to find relief from all the demonic spirits. Maybe they were what made him do it. I don't know. I don't know why he screamed and cried and ran through tombs night and day. It may have been, but he did these things to try to free himself, or maybe it was a result of not being able to free himself. He might have been compelled to do these things. But what really matters in this man's story, that he's in a desperate situation and he needs help, and help came ashore. Just as sure as help sat down on the back of my motorcycle. Whether you're lost and bound in sin, or whether you're saved and you're just getting cold and drifting away from God, there's only one cure for your condition. You don't need a pill. I need to get back to where I was because this thing went crazy. I hate technology. And I hate people that can handle technology better than me. But my app is running around here somewhere. And his name is Sean. And every once in a while I have to go on my app, fix this thing. And he can fix it. Now where did you go? Let me go back and remind you of where we was. Because sometimes when I park my motorcycle, I can't find it. So stick with me. It's right over here, and we'll get there. Whether you are lost and bound in sin, and you're watching, or you're sitting here, or whether you're saved and you've drifted away from God and your heart is growing cold, there is only one cure for your condition. You don't need a pill. You don't need a psychiatrist. You don't need a priest. You don't need some program. What you need is Jesus. He is the solution. He is the antidote to the poison of sin. He is the cure for what we need. He is the solution to our problem. So I encourage you, get to Jesus and get some help. There was that moment I really thought I was living a good life. But Susan and I was headed in different directions. And if I'd have continued, I'd have lost the best thing that's ever happened to me. That's where we were. And Jesus said, deny me now. I'll never bother you again. That was around 2 o'clock. Monday afternoon. And somewhere around 4:30, I knelt down next to my bed. And I said, Jesus, if you're who this Bible says you are, I'm in serious trouble. And I need your help. It doesn't take a theologian. All it takes is an honest heart. And if you're willing to open up your heart and allow Jesus to become the Lord of your life, He can give you all the help you'll ever need. Not for just that moment, but for the rest of your life. You'll quit running. You'll quit doing stupid things and call them fun. I'm not saying that you won't ever do another stupid thing, because I know a lot of stupid Christians. I'm one of them. But He will help you get out of your ditch. I've described a little bit of man's condition. It's not a pretty scene. I've tried to make it as tolerable as possible to hear it. But it could serve as a template that could be laid over millions of lives that are on this earth today. Those that walk the streets of our city. Those who live in your neighborhood. They're in these kind of situations. In fact, there's people in this room. You're bound. You're not happy. You don't know what to do. I tell you what you do. Get in a place where you give it all to Jesus. God, I've been good all my life. I've done the best I know how to do. But my life is miserable. And I just feel bound. The next thing you say is, Jesus, I've lost something that I had with you. Would you renew in me a right spirit? Would you fill me with your presence? Would you take my heart and remake it? Would you come into my life and be Lord of everything? If you need help of whatever kind, His name is Jesus. Surrender to Him. Marriages are still breaking up because of problems and being bound. People are just walking misery, taking drugs, drinking alcohol, chasing the night scenes because they're miserable. When all they'd have to do is surrender. Surrender's a scary thing because you feel like you're not in control anymore. You ain't in control now. You just change controls. And Jesus will take care. He said, I'll give you a peace that passes understanding. I'll give you a hope that's beyond hope. And I'll write your name in the Lamb's Book of Life and build a mansion for you. He's the master of the maniac. He's the master of my life. He's the master of most of your lives. But if He's not the master of your life, you can make Him that right now.